The movie begins with being shown a funeral service in a church. A man appears to express his condolences to another man named Walt Kowalski over the death of his wife, Dorothy. Walt is a war veteran, and with Dorothy, he has 2 children named Mitch and Andy. He also has 1 granddaughter and 3 grandsons. During the funeral, his granddaughter, who was present, was seen wearing a miniskirt and revealing shirt, which made Walt feel annoyed. But Walt looks very sad because he lost his wife, the only person who understands him. Dorothy's funeral was attended by many of her closest relatives, and after finishing at church, the banquet for guests continued at Walt's house. At Walt's house, the atmosphere seemed noisy, and Walt chose to be alone. He then went to his car garage and found his granddaughter caught smoking there. In the garage is also stored a Ford Gran Torino Type 1972 output. Seeing the car collection, his granddaughter asked him what he would do to the car when he died. However, Walt didn't answer his granddaughter's question and walked away. When Walt returns home, he is approached by a young priest who says that Dorothy was close to him during her life. The late Dorothy also sent a message to the young priest to look after Walt after she died and persuaded Walt to make a confession that he had never done. Walt then said he would not confess in front of someone younger than him. Meanwhile, next door to Walt's house is inhabited by a group of Asian people of Chinese descent surnamed Hmong. In the group, a young man named Thao was looked down upon by his family because he was too obedient to his elder brother's orders. From the outside, Walt seemed displeased with the Chinese presence and wondered why the people had moved to his neighborhood. The next day, Thao walked alone in the neighborhood, reading a book. Unbeknownst to him, he is followed by a car containing a group of American gangsters who harass and verbally him. Meanwhile, from the opposite direction, a car also appeared with gangsters from an Asian group, one of whom was a cousin of Thao. The American and Asian gangsters engaged in an argument for no apparent reason until one of the American gangsters pointed a gun at the Asian gangsters. This then made one member of an Asian gangster named Smokey brandish an Uzi-type weapon. Seeing the Uzi owned by Smokey, the group of American gangsters then walked away. After they left, the Asian gangsters began to approach Thao, and one of their members, named Spider, forced him to join their gangsters. But Thao didn't seem interested in joining because he didn't like violence and didn't want to get into trouble. They then left Thao, who continued his journey. Unexpectedly, Spider and his friends approached Thao's house, where he was gardening in his yard at that time. Her sister named Sue was on the house terrace. The Asian gangsters then approached Thao, who began to continuously persuade and force him to join their gang. Meanwhile, Sue decided to go inside the house. Because he had been forced to do so, Thao finally stood up and agreed to join the group. Thao's first job as a gangster is to steal his neighbor's Gran Torino car, which belongs to Walt. In the evening, Thao launched an action to steal Walt's car. However, Walt apparently realized someone was trying to get into his garage. With the rifle in his possession, he then headed for the garage to chase the thief away. Thao was frightened by Walt's bluff and decided to escape Walt's house. Meanwhile, the dark condition of the garage made it impossible for Walt to clearly see who would steal his car. Outside Walt's house, the gang of gangsters was waiting for Thao from the car. Meanwhile, Walt then repairs his garage so that a similar incident does not happen again. The following day, Walt received a call from his eldest son. When he received it, apparently his eldest son didn't mean to ask how he was but asked about his mother's jewelry. This made Walt annoyed and made him just hang up the phone. He then relaxed in front of his house, staring at the Gran Torino in his driveway. That night, Spider and his friends came to Thao's house to invite him back to join their group. But this time, the gangster group was aggressive by forcing and pulling Thao, who was sitting in his yard. Because of the commotion, the rest of the Thao family came out of the house and tried to separate them. The commotion apparently caused them all to feud until they set foot in Walt's yard. Walt had apparently witnessed the commotion, and when they entered his area, Walt was ready to point his gun at them. The American gangster group decided to retreat and leave the place. The Thao family then thanked Walt for making the gangsters leave, but Walt just told them to stay away from his house area. The following day, Walt was surprised by the variety of food and gifts in his yard. Apparently, the Thao family thanked him for his actions yesterday, which Walt himself had never helped anyone and just didn't want his yard to be disturbed by anyone. Moments later, Thao, accompanied by his mother, approached Walt and said that Thao apologized for the attempted theft of Walt's car that he did the other day. Walt only advised him not to repeat the same mistake, and if he did it again, he did not hesitate to kill him. That afternoon, Sue was walking with her friend to the record store. On their way, they meet a group of delinquents and they start harassing them. Sue is not afraid of their treatment, but it makes the delinquents even more challenged to annoy Sue. From a crossroads, Walt appeared in his Gran Torino and approached them. Walt seemed to gesture to take a gun out of his pocket and make the gang of thugs underestimate him even more. However, they did not expect Walt suddenly pull out a real gun from his pocket. He then ordered Sue to get into his car. On the way, Sue and Walt engaged in small talk. Walt was more friendly than usual, and Sue responded well to his chatter. A few days later, Walt seemed to be relaxing in front of the house when he saw the old woman who was his front neighbor dropping her groceries from the trunk of the car. Simultaneously, a group of youths passed, and instead of helping, they instead making fun of the woman. Walt looked like he was about to get up from his chair, but before he got up, he saw Thao rushing over to the old woman and helping her carry her things into the house. Not long after, Sue approached Walt to invite him to a barbecue at their house. Walt glanced at his cool empty storage and apparently, he had run out of beer. He then accepted Sue's invitation, hoping he would get a beer from Sue's house. The arrival of Walt was warmly welcomed by Sue's family, except for Sue's grandmother, who was still cold to Walt. In the family, there was a healer who kept his eyes on Walt. The healer then looked into Walt's dark past. He then said that Walt had made serious past mistakes and that it burdened him for the mistakes he had made until now. Hearing the healer's statement, Walt decided to be alone for a moment. But not long after, he coughed and decided to go to the toilet. In the toilet, he noticed blood in his cough, which meant he wasn't feeling well. When he opened the toilet door, he found Sue asking how he was, but Walt covered it up by saying he was fine. As Walt was about to leave the house, Sue's mother said that Thao intended to atone for the attempted theft of his car by giving money or rendering services to Walt. Sue's family also reassures Walt that this is important to do and that they will feel insulted if Walt refuses this. Walt then accepted the offer from Thao and hired him the next day. At home, Walt was coughing up blood more often and decided to visit the doctor to check himself. Based on the examination results, the doctor stated that Walt had a chronic disease and his life would not be long. This makes Walt contact his children individually in hopes of mending his bad relationship. But his good intentions are ignored by his children, who says they are currently busy. The next day, Walt hired Thao to do various jobs, from helping fix roofs, uprooting trees, cleaning cars, and lifting things to painting houses. Everything was done by Thao to save himself from the association of Asian gangsters who often passed their house. While observing Thao, Walt realized that he was a man who was shy and had low self-esteem. This fact makes Walt move his heart to make Thao a tough young man. Thao was then invited to work in one of the factories owned by Walt's friend, Tim Kennedy. Tim then accepted Thao as one of its workers and promised to find a job in the factory for him. A few days later, Thao was officially an employee of Tim's factory. Thao, who was returning from the factory at that time, was seen getting off the bus when he was confronted by a group of Asian gangsters who used to harass him. They then attacked Thao and poked a cigarette in his cheek, causing him to scream in pain. After the persecution, Thao finally continued his journey home empty-handed because all his factory tools had been damaged by the gangster. On the way, Walt meets Thao and realizes he has just been bullied by a gang of gangsters. Walt then visits Spider's headquarters but only finds Smokey. He then beats him to a pulp and warns him not to disturb Thao if he wants to live peacefully. One night, Walt was seen in the living room of his house. Suddenly, Spider's group passed in front of Thao's house and fired at the house as a warning not to mess around. Hearing this, Walt rushed to check on his neighbor. Lucky Thao only had a scratch on his neck, and no other family members were injured. Thao then remembered Sue at her friend's house. He rushed to contact Sue's friend, but she said Sue had left about an hour ago. They then waited anxiously for Sue to come home, fearing that the group would do something to her. Moments later, they heard Sue's voice in pain from outside the house. They rushed over to Sue, who was battered all over her body. Sue had apparently been violated by the gangsters, which made her family and Walt sad and devastated. Walt then excused himself to go home because his emotions worsened. He began to vent his emotions by destroying things in his house. After being satisfied with venting his emotions, he confessed to the priest. Walt admitted that he had killed hundreds of innocent people while fighting in Korea. Walt then asked for permission to carry out the massacre once again, but this time on humanitarian grounds, to keep Thao and Sue's family alive. With Thao, Walt cleaned up the rifle he had long owned. Thao also seems impatient to avenge his sister by killing Smokey and his friends. Walt then took him to the basement to be given a silver star because they might not survive the action tonight. The silver star was given as a form of appreciation for Thao's courage to carry out this action. However, Walt suddenly locks the door, locking Thao in the basement. He apparently already has a plan for revenge alone and does not want to involve anyone in the action. Thao seemed furious at Walt's actions, but there was nothing he could do but shout at Walt to open the door for him. After leaving his dog with Thao's grandma, Walt then called Sue to tell her the basement key where Thao was locked. He said he wanted Thao and Sue's families to live more peacefully without gangsters disturbing them. That night, Walt approached the gangsters' headquarters, and they were all ready with weapons in hand. Walt then gestured to shoot them one by one using his bare hands. He then put his hand back into his pocket and made all the gangsters think he was going to take out a gun, but in reality, he just took out a cigarette from his pocket. Walt then asked them all if they had matches. The gangster members were confused by his question. Walt then put his hands in his pockets very quickly. The gangsters then shot Walt because they thought he would take a gun. However, he actually took a match out of his shirt. The brutal shooting resulted in Walt's death, with dozens of bullets lodged in his body. This incident was witnessed directly by the neighbors who were there. Not long after, the police arrived on the scene to arrest the gangsters on charges of shooting an unarmed man. Apparently, Walt didn't mean to take revenge but sacrificed himself for the safety of the Thao and Sioux families. Moreover, he realized that his life was not long, so he chose to die as a hero. A few days after Walt was buried, city officials held an inheritance distribution ceremony. During the event, it was discovered that Walt gave his house to the church at his late wife's request, while Walt's Gran Torino car was officially given to Thao because only Thao accompanied Walt's days until the end of his life. Sometime after that, the scene shows Thao driving the Gran Torino, and the film ends. The moral learned from this story is to always do good to someone regardless of their background, because we don't know what that person has done in their life.